So, you think you know how gold pans work? That's an inanimate wooden board. Gold pans! I think that you know how gold pans work, but I'm here to tell you, you might not. Gold pans, just like this one, have been in use for an extraordinarily long time, dating back as far as 4,000 years. And the designs have changed a little bit, from the traditional Battea pan all the way up to a modern iteration of the same thing, but functionally they all work the same. And that's our secret friend, density. If you're like me and you're unlucky enough to remember all the way back to high school, you'll understand that density and mass are two very different things. This rock and this rock have different densities, so they might be a really similar size, but they'll weigh significantly different. So the density is like how tightly your atoms are packed together. A quartz rock has a density of around 2.4, so that means it weighs 2.4 grams per cubic centimeter. Gold has a density of around 19.2 to 19.3, depending on the other associated minerals with it. So it is super dense, and that means that it outdensifies almost everything else in this river. Enter our gold pan. Our gold pan is specifically designed to take advantage of that density. My gold pan here is full of material. So the first thing that the gold pan does is it captures all of the material within a certain zone. So you know where the gold's going to be, it's going to be in your pan. That might seem very obvious. The next thing it does is it allows hard surfaces that gold can't penetrate through to stop the gold. Now, how does it stop the gold? Well, it does it through stratification. So when we introduce vibration, movement, and fluidity to soil, soil is automatically going to try to stratify. That means all the lights come to the top and all of the heaviest things, the densest things, go to the bottom. That's why you will get pieces of gravel like this on the top of your soil, because their density isn't enough to penetrate through the dense things underneath it. By this stage, a lot of you are probably thinking, yeah, we know all that, Chris. Get to the point. I'm getting to the point. I've got to show you what most people think is happening in a gold pan first. So let's do the stratification. By shaking the material around underwater, you're creating all the sediment to separate. The movement plus the water pushes the particles apart. That's what allows for that stratification to happen. All right, our stratification should be relatively complete. As I said, we've got all the lightest rocks on top. Even though they're big, their density isn't enough to fight through the friction caused by the more dense pieces of material underneath it. And because we know gold's the heaviest thing, we know it's probably sunk to the bottom of the pan, and we can literally just get rid of all that top material. The next part is really interesting. We're trying to force all the gold not only to the bottom of the pan, but to the front corner. And yes, a gold pan does have a corner. It's where the wall of the pan meets the bed of the pan. That is where you want your gold to be sitting. You might be wondering what these are. Well, these are called riffles. There are different types of riffles. These are what I call onset riffles. So the riffle actually juts out of the wall of the pan. Then there are inset riffles that do the opposite. They actually go into the wall of the pan. Theoretically speaking, inset riffles are a little bit better, because the common theory is that the deeper the riffle, the more likely it is that the gold's going to sink into it and not be able to escape. Now that we're stratified, we're going to force all of the gold into the bottom corner of the pan, and then we're going to use the water to float the top soils off. And if we do it correctly, we're going to constantly be removing the next lightest material from our pan. And then we simply keep repeating this process until we're left with the most dense, heavy things at the bottom of our pan. And you're going to rely on a more gentle action to wash those lighter sands off, so the water doesn't accidentally access the gold at any point. Eventually, you're going to be left with the heaviest of the heavies. That is going to be your black sands, which you can see just there. And with some luck, a little bit of gold. Look at that. That's very fine gold. And if you're getting very fine gold, it means you're panning correctly, because it's the hardest stuff to maintain in your pan. That's how most people think gold pans work. The common misconception that I am about to talk about is this. Your riffles are there to protect the gold from falling out of your pan. Most people think that happens during the wash down phase. So you'll have half a pan's worth of dirt, you'll be washing down and you think, oh, the riffles are keeping my gold safe. That's not what they're actually there for. They're not there to stop your gold from falling out of the pan. They're there to stop your dirt from moving. All right, that might not make a lot of sense to most people out there. Everyone I've talked to about this in the prospecting community out on the creek, it hasn't really translated straight away until I've shown them. You're not going to lose gold over the top of your riffles if you make sure that the water doesn't take the dirt from the back edge of where your dirt is. But you will lose gold you didn't know you had from underneath. To show this to you properly, I need to put you on GoPro cam. It's very hard to spot if you have a tripod set camera, but from a first person perspective, you'll actually see how the dirt is moving. It's a lot easier to see this in action when we get a small amount of dirt. So remember, our stratification process is to vigorously move the pan around with water in it. And what that does is create that fluidity. It opens the dirt, allows the gold to sink. At the same time, it's allowing us to wash off lighter material from the top. But if you watch what happens when I start moving the pan on the water, you're going to note one of two things. The first one is the dirt is going to remain still, and the second thing is it's actually the pan moving around the dirt. The dirt will move a little bit because it's being shaken and violently moved around by the water, but it stays in the same position, whereas the pan itself is the part that's moving. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that the pan is making a big circle and the dirt here is just sloshing around in the same position. Then we go to wash off and the same thing happens. The dirt is trying to stay in the same position, and that is happening because the riffles here are anchoring it to the bed of the pan. Without those riffles there, something interesting happens. If we change to the other side of the pan, we now no longer have anything anchoring the dirt to the bed of the pan, and you can see that the dirt likes to slosh around a lot more in the same position. Because the gold is dense, it sinks to the very bed of the pan, and that means some of it's going to travel up this wall. When you do that, if you move your pan back too fast, if you move your pan from side to side too fast while you're shaking it around, the gold that's now on the bed can fall off because you've removed the pan from underneath the dirt. And that is why we have riffles, and that is how gold pans actually work. It also means that when you're panning with something like a steel pan that has no riffles, you are going to have to be a lot more careful in how you move the dirt. An up and down motion always keeps the pan underneath the dirt, whereas a front to back motion removes the pan from underneath the dirt. Therefore, you will lose gold. Unlike on the riffle side is there to make sure that the bed dirt doesn't shift from underneath. It's also the reason why you tend to use a smooth edge pan for cleanups and you use a riffle side to pan down your initial concentrates, because it's very hard to get clean gold with a riffled pan, simply because it's anchoring too much of the concentrates in your pan to the pan itself. You can see with a smooth edge pan, you can take it down really far if you're careful. And the coolest thing about doing it this way is that you'll see where the gold's accumulating. Might be a bit hard to see on a GoPro, I'll get the other camera out, but the gold is all sitting on the wall right here, which is what your riffle would prevent from moving. So that's some stuff you might not have known about gold pans, and hopefully it helps you improve your panning technique and some of the pitfalls that you might fall into if you didn't know that information.